Welcome to This Love Works, the podcast that is raising the bar for exceptional relationships. Join psychotherapist Marianne Marlowe as she talks with couples who've mastered the art of healthy, passionate relationships. They explore what makes their real love work and dig into topics featuring cutting-edge research and relationship science. Let's listen in.
Welcome. This is Marianne Marlowe of This Love Works, of the This Love Works podcast with my producer, Kelly Rashidi. I am so pleased to welcome you to the This Love Works podcast. And this is our first episode. I want to tell you a little bit about what we're going to be doing and how we are going to unfold this podcast. It's super exciting for me to actually get here. We've been talking about putting this podcast together for quite a long time, and I have the structure that really needed to be set up. But the inspiration for this podcast has been percolating for me for quite a long time. In fact, I was sharing with Kelly that I was inspired to do a podcast because I really see podcasting as the most efficient way of getting out the message of This Love Works. And This Love Works is really different. I started out doing therapy, and I had a really general practice for about 6 years. I've been doing this now for about 21 years. And about 6 or 7 years into my practice, my husband and I hit a pretty dark, bleak spot in our marriage. And I, of course, being the dutiful therapist, went out and sought therapy. And no lie, in about 2 years, we saw about 6 different therapists, right, in the area. And, admittedly, I'm a little picky, right? As a therapist, I'm going to be a little picky about the quality of the people that we see. And I think therapists in general are really good at kind of, BSing the process. And I don't think it's conscious. I mean, I see a lot of therapists in my practice, so I don't think that it's conscious, but it's definitely sort of subconscious. We kind of know the drill. We know the questions to ask. We know why the questions are being asked. So when my husband and I started the whole therapeutic process, it didn't go well. And one of the things that I really learned was that many therapists that call themselves couples therapists may have had, a smattering of relationship work in their graduate program, but unless you have a practice that is devoted to couples therapy and relationships, you are not really qualified to do couples therapy. And I really learned that the hard way. I mean, I had been doing it, truth be told, I had been doing couples work, but without having the specialty and the focus of really entirely focusing my practice on the cutting edge therapeutic models, I was probably at some point just, spinning the wheels, which gets really frustrating, right? Because couples therapy is extremely taxing. You're already coming to therapy with a really difficult time. And your primary relationship is the relationship where everything else flows from, right? So if you're having a problem in your relationship and you're not getting any relief, that can create a lot of suffering, and not just for you, but for the other people that are around you. I mean, we had really young kids at the time. I think our kids were like 6 and maybe 4 at the time that we started couples therapy, and we were really spinning our wheels. So after that process, what I really wanted to do was dedicate my practice and my post-grad work to doing couples work and finding out why relationships were so difficult to treat and what were some of the most effective ways out, right? Because listen, when you're in pain, efficiency is really very, very important. And so I was really inspired to be efficient. And I have to say that one of the most efficient forms of therapy that I have been trained to do, and most of my post-grad work has been doing consciousness work, subconsciousness work, and in the consciousness realm, doing spiritual therapy, and having a community of other therapists where I could get the kind of support that is necessary. So efficiency is very, very important. I want to help people get out of their suffering more quickly and to go deeper more efficiently. Because listen, when you can go deep and in the work that you're doing, and not just keep talking about the argument of the argument that you had that week, which was kind of what we were doing in couples therapy, and I couldn't stand that. We'd come in and we would regurgitate the argument, and I'd be like, no, I didn't say that, and he said, oh yes, you did say that, and that's when I said this, and I was like, oh no, you didn't say that, you said that, and that's why I responded in this way, right? And that was draining. That was even more draining than the fights. And so we went nowhere fast, and I really dedicated my practice and committed to myself and people that I work with that I'm not going to just regurgitate the problems, because that's not going to help you. I always say, listen, you can do that at home. You don't need to have that same argument in my office, right? Because that's what you're already doing at home. You're experts at it. And what I can offer you is something different. And really, Kelly, the purpose of doing the kind of work that I do is to go in, mine the information that we need so that we can create healthy interventions, right? Healthy ways of behaving to get you out of those old patterns of behavior.
So can you give an example of deeper and efficient? So when you use those words, can you give a small example of what you would do with a couple?
Yeah, you mean not just use those therapy words and actually give a good example so that people know what I'm talking about, huh?
Yeah.
So when we come in and we start to talk about the problems, it's very easy to talk on the surface about the problems. And let's face it, there are 5 things that couples fight about on a regular basis. Right. Those 5 things that a couple fights about on a regular basis, and we can deviate from this a little bit, but primarily the things that we are fighting about mostly are money, sex or physical intimacy, right? Touch. And what we know is that couples have widely varying matches on this, or mismatches. The third thing that we ordinarily fight about are kids, extended family, or our friends, or pets, right? Because what we know here in the Pacific Northwest is that pets are literally, sometimes replacement children. And the fourth thing is work or hobbies or free time, right? The thing that we spend our time on outside of the relationship. And then finally, mess or disorder and how we deal with that, right? How many arguments do people have around balancing the checkbook, or picking up the laundry, or not picking up the laundry, or whatever we're fighting about? And when people come into the office, they actually believe that argument is what is really going on in the relationship. And so people will spend a lot of time and great pains going into detail about all of the elements of the kid argument that I'm having, or the mess argument that I'm having. So one of the most important things is to very efficiently get underneath. And when we can quiet our bodies and our minds, and we can get into our nervous system, right? When we can regulate our nervous system, meaning quiet ourselves from the argument, that's when we have more access to what's really bothering me. So it's not really bothering me that you left the knife that has congealed mayonnaise on the counter after making a sandwich. It might have happened in my house. I'm not really upset about that. What I'm really upset about is that it is important to me, at the end of the day, when I come out of my office and go into the kitchen, to have a nice kitchen, to cook. I love to cook. It is my transition time. It is the time that I go from meeting with people back into being with my family and nourishing them and being creative, right? Cooking is super creative for me. And so it's, the 45 minutes or an hour that I put together my meal is really important time for me. And so when somebody, continues not to pay attention to the fact that that's a really important thing for me, then I feel unimportant and I feel unloved. And what do? Sometimes I throw a tantrum because that's my, unresourced part behaving in a way that isn't particularly pro relationship. And then I invite my husband's unresourced part into the interaction. And now we're just throwing sand at each other. It's like two little kids in a sandbox, just being pissed off at each other and throwing sand at each other. So when we can cut through all of that and really get underneath, and I use various techniques, I'll ask somebody to just check in, get into their bodies, the soma, get into the body. What is it that they need to do? And how do they need to be with themselves in a deeper way, right? In the relationship in a deeper way. What do? Ground yourself, put your feet on the ground, breathe into your body. And it's amazing, just a few little adjustments. Yeah, you just did it. Take a deep breath.
I know. Every time you say breathe, I'm like, yeah.
Right. And then we get so attuned to that, right? Filling up. But I'll also say this, we have to be tuned into our partner. That's the other part of it as well, because sometimes taking that deep breath actually agitates people, right? Sometimes it doesn't just quiet the nervous system. We have to really be attuned to our partners. So the first thing that I always tell people is, check in with yourself. What is it that you're feeling? Rather than regurgitate this argument, let's check in. What is it that I'm feeling? Well, I'm feeling pissed off. That's the very first thing. That's the most accessible emotion, right? And for me, being pissed off was something that was I was allowed to express that. That was one of our family values. So I learned how to really cover up the feelings of vulnerability and hurt by being pissed off. So what we know is that anger is a cover emotion. And so what I've come to really understand and teach in my groups and the This Love Works community is that being conscious of what I'm experiencing is the first step. I've got to slow down, check in with myself, understand what it is that I'm actually feeling, and then I can communicate, right? So the very first thing that I have to do is to check in with myself, and then I have to check in with my partner. We call it attunement. I want to attune with my person. I want to see, oh, okay, well, he looks kind of hurt too. And so now, rather than being pissed off with each other, now we have a different place to go. And everything has to be in service of the couple relationship. We have to remember that the reason that we're really fighting with each other is because we really love each other. And we want to always come back to that and understand what we're in it for. So the very first part of getting clear and going deeper is to check in with myself, see what is it that I'm really experiencing. So I have to sort of assess what's happening in the moment, assess and check in for the readiness that we're at to be able to talk about this. Because sometimes the best thing to do is just to say, you know what, let's take a time out, let's walk away and bring ourselves back into the moment. I sometimes will say, come back into your body.
Yeah.
Come back into your body.
For me, that taking a step back consciously was huge in my relationship, because I wanted to fix the problem. I wanted to, keep at it. And as soon as I stepped back and took some space and allowed my partner to take some space, it made it a lot easier for us to communicate.
Yeah, I love what you're saying because it's the anxiety of getting the argument over, right? We are in so much pain. I'm in pain. I see my partner's in pain and I want to get this over with. And so we end up being like, Pac-Man chasing our person through the house. And what is it? Look, talk to me. What is it? Talk to me. Don't isolate, talk to me. And we end up just kind of sometimes driving that. The argument escalating it even further. So by just taking a minute and getting curious about what's happening with me allows me to go from one part of my brain, that little pesky reptile brain, which is an indicator that I'm not feeling safe and sound, right? Not physically unsafe, but emotionally unsafe. And I have to get curious, okay, what's really going on here for me? So when we are able to take stock of that and drop down into our bodies and in the moment, then we can move to another part of our brain that has a lot of really important information. So the next thing that we have to really look at is, okay, so what is it that I'm really feeling and experiencing here? It's not about the mess. It's not about the knife on the counter. So if we automatically know that, of those 5 things, they are in some way a threat to the relationship, to the couple, or Stan Tatkin calls it the couple bubble, the bonded couple, right? The mess that I'm arguing about or wanting to argue about with my husband is another thing. He calls it the third. So there's my husband, there's me, that's the 2 of us. And anything that is threatening that is going to be a third. And all of those 5 things that I mentioned, the 5 things that couples fight about, those are all thirds. Money, sex, kids, mess, those are all thirds. So we have to treat them like thirds and ensure that we are on the same side of the argument. And being curious is the very first way that we get on the same side of the argument. I check in with me and I check in with my person. And then I drop into what's really bugging me here.
Yeah. Well, and that understanding of your partner, that deeper understanding of your partner, I could see how that could relieve so much of the anxiety, because you have understanding then, and you don't have to, guess at what the deal is, because now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And we don't have to keep going over the fact that it's the knife on the counter, right?
Right.
So once we have an understanding of what it's really about, then we start to look at some of the more subconscious magic. And I do think that this is a little bit of magic. When I really discovered spiritual psychology, hypnotherapy, it completely changed my practice. I will say that when I started practicing, I had come from a background, I worked for Microsoft and in tech companies, and had an organizational development lens. And when there's a problem in a company, you look at it very, very specifically and quite strategically. And if there's a problem with an employee, you put them on a performance improvement plan. You have steps to either get off the performance improvement plan or leave the company. But those are goals that are developed very specifically. And we don't necessarily treat our relationships that way. And so it was super frustrating for me not to have a clear pathway when I started to switch gears and do therapy. Because, hey, if you just do these steps, it's kind of like what coaching has morphed into. If you do these steps, things will change, things will improve. And that wasn't the way it was working. It wasn't working in a very neat, roadmap.
Yeah.
So doing subconscious work and hypnotherapy and all of the modalities within that, within the subconscious, working with subconscious mind, actually became a very efficient way to work, because we stopped talking almost immediately about the knife on the counter. We stopped talking about the mess. We stopped talking about the laundry, or the fact that I do more of the cooking, or that, you do more of the, kid pickup or whatever. And then we really want to pay attention to what that emotional trigger is all about for me.
So when you talk about subconscious, it's kind of like your blind spots, right? Things
Oh,
that
for
you
sure.
things that you aren't aware of that you do automatically. And then, doing the work with you through the subconscious work in hypnotherapy, you can find out what those blind spots are.
Yeah. And, here's the thing. We have this sense that when we do hypnotherapy, there's like this formal trance, and we've all seen the either real stage hypnosis or the fake stage hypnosis, where people think that they're going to levitate or cluck like chicken or any number of the other crazy things that people think are going to happen. But we have trance states all day long on a very regular basis, right? Like any time that you kind of are in an activity where you lose time, you can bet that you're in some kind of a trance state, right? Driving is a great example. For those of us who get from point A to point B, don't even really think about it. You get out of your car and you're like, oh, okay, well, I didn't even really think about how much time that took. That's a trance state. I used to do a lot of sewing back in the day as another creative outlet for myself. And I could spend the entire day sewing and forget to eat, right? Because it was such an involved activity. Well, that's a trance state. Watching TV is a trance state. And so we don't necessarily have to have, an advanced, what we would call an induction, which is the part where you close your eyes and focus on your breathing or count backwards or any of the other, little techniques that we use. Although there's certainly a place for that, we can also access those trance states by simply taking a moment, shifting gears, engaging our senses, and being focused on what's happening in the moment. And that can create a trance state. And the real purpose of getting involved in a trance state is to access the part of our mind that's going to give us this really important information. And the next step to get to that really important information is to understand, okay, what am I really feeling? I'm not really pissed off. I mean, that's sort of the coping mechanism, but I'm really sad. Right? I'm feeling a little bit hurt. I'm feeling not paid attention to. That's my false belief. And then I start to act in all of these ways that don't really, help the relationship. And I can get to that by understanding, as soon as I drop into that trance state, okay, what am I really feeling? I'm feeling sad. Because every time I see, those knives that have junk on them on the counter when I come out to cook, I feel sad, a little hurt. Because what I make that to mean is that you don't care about me.
Right.
And when I start to believe that you don't care about me, then I can drop into, okay, where does that really take me back to? Because there's almost always a regression, a going back somehow into an original wounding that gives us the important information. And again, it can happen quite handily. It can happen quite quickly when we start to use these techniques on a regular basis. When I understand what that really took me back to, right? Like, when was the time on a regular basis that I felt hurt and unloved and as though I wasn't being paid attention to? Well, that takes me right back to a very consistent experience I had as a kid. Now, what I learn is, okay, well, then what is it that I then do to take care of myself? Because I know it's not going to happen out there. I know it's not going to happen with my, in that moment anyway, with the people that I was with, my caregivers, my family, my parents. Right?
So that's the
And
deeper, that's the
that's the
deeper part of
deeper,
the method. Yep.
that's the deeper part of the method.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing, and I get this question a lot, and I think it's really important to say that this is not about beating up our parents. It's not about, bad mouthing them. I'm a firm believer that people are doing the best that they can, with what they have in the moment. I really, truly believe that. And I'm certainly not interested in parent bashing. I know that that's sometimes a part of the therapeutic process for people, but that's not a useful framework. I think that it's important for us to be able to make determinations about what was really going on, but how we were relating to it, right? How we, as usually children at the time, were relating to what we were seeing and experiencing. So it's not about parent bashing. I think we can do both, and we can see what was actually happening and understand that our parents or caregivers were doing the best that they could. So then once we have an understanding of what the false belief is that I have, right, I am uncared for, I am unloved, then I can notice, all right, what did I learn to do? Well, what I learned to do was to shut down and turn off to those people that I was vulnerable to, and to take care of myself. So that's one of my great strategies. That's a strategy. It worked really well back then. Here's the thing. I am now dragging that behavior into my current relationship, and it doesn't work so well. So it doesn't work so well in a pro-relational kind of, pattern of behavior. So the next move for us is to reconnect with the part of me, the wise self, right? The part of me that really knows that this relationship is the most important thing in my life. Right? My relationship to my partner is one of the most important relationships that I have in my life. Otherwise, I wouldn't be investing time, energy, everything that I do into it. And I have to pay a lot of attention to what it is that I want in the relationship and how I want to relate to that relationship. So I want to reconnect to my higher self. That's the part of me that can see that those, wounded parts, the part that gets upset when there's a knife left on the counter, that's a wounded part. So how do I want to relate to that part? Well, I have to find out what she really wants. So that's the next question that I ask myself. What is it that I really am longing for? Well, I think in that case, I'm really longing for a little recognition, maybe acknowledgement, and I want to be known, right? That's the other really important thing, the intimacy. One of the things that we, as couples, we want to be known, we want to be seen, we want to be heard, and we want to be wanted. So I know that I want to be known, I want to be recognized, I want my partner to know that I want to come out and have that counter really clean. So how do I want to relate to that? What is it that I want to do? I have to appeal to that part of me that feels really, out of sight, angry, hurt. And it's my responsibility to manage that first.
Yeah, and I think it's one thing that I heard you say was that it's important that the partner hears what the other partner is feeling.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's my responsibility too, right? I mean, I think that one of the things that one of our strategies, those strategies that worked really well when we were kids that no longer work, is to clam up, to be quiet, because why bother? It's not going to do any good anyway. And so when we drag that into our relationships, then we cut off another resource for healing, right? Because it's not just me. I mean, I'm ultimately responsible for taking care of that little little girl part on the inside. But the beauty of having a supportive relationship, a good relationship, is that your partner, your person can help you with that.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, when we are able to really express what's happening, then it's an invitation
Yeah.
to our partner. They can then help us also, and letting us know, oh yeah, no, I see you. I hear you. I appreciate you. You're really important to me. Right. And then ultimately, when we have figured out the antidote, right? When I figure out what it is that I really am longing for there, what I really want, then I can give that to myself in a healthy way. And one of those healthy ways, to your point, is to talk to our loved one, talk to our person, or in poly relationships or people.
Right.
Making sure that they know really specifically what that just took me out of the moment with you, where that took me back to, right? My 7-year-old self. And now here's what I want to do about it. And I would love your help. And I think that's the other thing too, right? That we have to be able to express that. Understanding that I am ultimately responsible for my needs being met, but I can ask my partner, what I want. I can ask, knowing that I might not get it. And then ultimately, it's still my responsibility to make sure it happens.
Right.
Because, let's face it, if I want a hug, I'm responsible for getting that hug. And, by putting my arms around myself is just fine, but it's, it's really the embrace of somebody else that I want. So I have to ask for that, knowing I might not get it. And, if my husband is traveling or unable to embrace me or give me that physical touch, well, I can get that from somebody else in a healthy way, or get a massage. There's all sorts of healthy ways that we can get that need met. So asking, to your point, is very, very important, and being explicit about what it is that we need. So, we've spent a lot of time talking about it, but truly, once we learn these techniques, it happens, within minutes. We're able to access that information very quickly, very efficiently. And we're going to be talking a lot about that on this podcast, and couples who have learned to manage their own relationships in really efficient and effective ways. And, one of the things that This Love Works dedicated to is raising the standard for the quality of relationships. That was the big gap that I was experiencing. And so I have gone out and studied with, anybody that has a connection to relationship or intimacy, have studied with them to bring my audience and to bring my clientele and patients to the most effective ways of managing relationship, and to have the strongest, most connected bonds, that safe and secure relationship that you dream about. When you first get together with your person, I want to make sure that we get those sparks back, and that we are raising the standards, that currently what's happening in our world with regard to relationships, that we're raising those standards, that we have tried and true methods for managing the relationship, managing conflict, and doing less harm, repairing more quickly, taking the stress out of relationships, and getting more help and support in relationships. It's a very, very important thing. And so with every podcast, we're going to be bringing in guests that are going to help and share, mentor couples that are going to provide their unique perspective. And then we are going to end with a meditation that's going to reconnect you with your higher self. And it's a great podcast for those of you who are single as well, because we all have aspirations for connection, and connection with our unique needs and our unique desires. And that's a very, very important understanding, is how am I going to get that, right? Because the best way to draw in a great relationship is to be a great partner, to have a lot of clarity and understanding about yourself so that you can bring somebody to you that also has clarity and understanding of themselves. So we want two, awesome people to have an awesome relationship and be able to really create something special. Because listen, I truly believe this, Kelly, that when a couple can manage to learn ways to get out of the conflicts that they're in and create a really secure relationship, that they know their person has their back, and that we have their back, right? That's like relationship gold. When we have those kinds of secure relationships, we create more secure families, more secure workplaces. We create more secure communities, and ultimately a more secure world. And as corny as that sounds, it really does have that kind of ripple effect. We know that when we are kinder and when we are clearer about what part we have in relationships and how we draw out the best in our partners.
Well, I can see that, because if you're learning this method with your partner, I'm assuming that you're going to take that, like you said, to the person that you work with most closely, to your friends, to your family.
Right.
Those methods will apply to all those different relationships.
Yeah, of course, right? Because when we learn how to relate in the world, that, as you're pointing out, is not just our most intimate relationship, but it's all relationships. How we do one thing, it's how we do everything in measure. And so I think it's really important to understand that this is really when you make a commitment to doing deep work, and have some really efficient tools to manage your own experiences, right? Because no matter how much we learn and how much we practice, we're still going to step in it. We're still going to have conflict. We're still going to, our shadow selves are still going to come out and play around. But how is it that we move through that more quickly and efficiently? And how is it that we repair relationships when we, do harm? And that, I think, is ultimately what we're after with the This Love Works podcast and the method that I've developed.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the program and the podcast moving forward, and having different topics and talking to those mentoring couples. I think that's going to be really powerful. So
yeah, I
look
think so
forward to
too.
that.
I'm super excited. We have a great lineup of people who, again, have people who work together, people who have gotten divorced, and who then have recognized that they have a more meaningful relationship together. And so what are the things that they learned, and how are they creating more consciousness in their relationship now? People who have been in relationship for long periods of time, what do they have to offer us? And finally, what we're going to do right now, which is to get back into our bodies, take a moment of consciousness where you put your feet on the floor, feel your hips rounded, connected, allowing yourself to be very conscious of your breath as you breathe in and out effortlessly. Maybe you even close your eyes gently and easily, and let yourself imagine your best self in relationship. What is your posture like? Your eyes softening. Notice your energy. Allow yourself to feel peace. Now, with that, take a nice deep breath in, bringing back your wisest, highest self back into the room, taking a nice deep breath in, feeling your body coming back, feeling the energy returning to your legs, to your torso, returning back into the room. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next time on the This Love Works podcast, raising the standards for quality relationships. See you soon.